Okay, so I'm going to show you guys how to do different kinds of undertones for skin tones. So we're going to do red undertones, yellow undertones, and we're going to do a third one with blue undertones. You're going to have 3 different scales. Each one is 7 steps. Each box is a square inch, so this will be 1 inch by 7 inches. So you guys can have those scales arranged any way you want on your paper, totally up to you. I do have mine numbered, which I do think helps, and then right underneath the number 4 box I do have labeled there the base. So this is going to be like the base color that I'm going to mix up, and then what I'll do from over to the left is I'll work on the tints of those, and then over to the right I'm going to work on the shades of each one of those undertones. So as far as the base, we're going to start with the red undertone first. Basically, you just need a few colors. You don't need a whole lot. So we're going to use burnt sienna and yellow oxide for this. Since we're doing red undertones, we're going to go heavier on the burnt sienna when we make the base mixture. Technically, to make any brown, all you need are your 3 primary colors. This just kind of, by using these already made mixtures, it just kind of speeds up the process. But technically, I could do the same thing, just with those 3 colors, and then black and white. So what I'm going to do, you guys should make sure that you have water and like a paper towel just to kind of dry off your brush. Water is not necessarily a good thing for acrylic paint. Kind of breaks down the paint, so you always want to make sure that even if your brush is wet, it's just not like kind of soaked with water. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do, kind of put this into the camera here, I'm going to start by just trying to make my base for the red undertone. So I'm going to start with, because, and the rule of thumb typically when you're mixing colors is to start with your lighter color first. So I'm going to start with my yellow oxide, and I'm going to go ahead and probably, and this is super technical terms, I'm going to start with 2 scoops of yellow, with the yellow oxide, okay? So 2 scoops. And whenever you grab your paint, you always want to grab your paint from the outside edge of the pile, so that if you do have other colors on your brush, you're not contaminating that whole pile. So always grab your paint from the outside. So I've got about 2 scoops of the yellow oxide. Now because the burnt sienna is the darker in the 2 that I'm mixing together, I'm just going to start with 1 scoop, even though this is going to be red undertones. I'm going to start with just 1 scoop. And I'm going to go ahead and mix that up and just see what I've got. So one thing you're going to learn about painting is that it's just one big experiment. You're never going to really know what you need to do until you just do it. So what we're looking for is just a base for this. We want it to be more red than yellow. And it can be a little hard to see. Let me see here. I'm going to try to, I don't know if that helps. That's probably as good as it's going to get. Mine right now is looking just still a little bit on the orangey side, so I'm going to go ahead and add probably what I would consider like a half a scoop more of the burnt sienna. Now you guys might be in a different boat, that's fine. And just kind of mix that up. Now, when you're working with like kind of a thick-bodied paint like acrylic or even oils, a lot of times people, like professional artists, will actually mix with palette knives rather than brushes, because as you can see, your brush kind of gets all clumped up. A lot of paint kind of like just kind of collects in different areas of the brush, so palette knife is typically how professional artists do it. So I've got here actually a finished scale that I've done. You can kind of see here what that looks like. I think I'm going to add more red. Now, when I did those practice scales the other day, I just used these 2 colors, but I think what I'm going to do today, just to kind of get a little bit more warmth in it, I'm going to, and again, super technical terms here, I'm going to add like a dot. You ready? A dot of this Cad Red Deep. So I'm just kind of got a little bit of a dot, I don't know if you can see it, just a little dot of that red, and I'm going to add that into there to just give it a little bit more warmth. And I think I like it. I think I'm going to add a little bit more into that. Oh yeah. Okay. Yep, that's what I need. That gave it just more of that kind of red that I was looking for. Alright, so I feel like I've got my base down pretty good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and paint that down in my number 4 box. Now whenever I'm painting something like this where I've got shapes that I have to paint inside, I start in the middle and then basically push the paint to the outside edge. I find that if I do it that way, I can control it better. Now, if you do feel like your paint is a little bit on the sort of thick, clumpy side, sometimes what I'll do is dip my brush in my water just to kind of make it a little bit more fluid. Again, start in the middle and just kind of push your paint to the outside edge. I also like to just kind of turn my sketchbook around. So I'm working on mine right now, upside down. Alright, so once you got that filled in, okay, you can either go towards your tints or you can go towards your shades. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and do my tints first, okay? So I'm going to kind of set this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my base color, I'm going to take about half of this paint, and I'm going to make a separate pile, because I want to leave the other half for my shades. Now if I run out of my base, I'll make some more, that's not a big deal. But I don't want to go ahead and add white to that whole pile, because then I'm inevitably going to have to make more paint, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and just take half of my base color, make a separate pile. Now what I'm going to do, and I haven't washed off my brush yet, and I don't need to, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick up what I would call is a kind of like a scoop of white. And I'm going to go ahead and mix that with this second pile that I just created. So this is me working on my tints of the red undertone. And since I'm doing this right next to my base pile, I can see the difference. So the point is that with each one of these squares is that you do see a difference from one color to the other, or one tint or one shade to another. And I want to be able to tell difference. I'm going to add just a little bit more. There we go. And once I get that mixed in, I'm going to go ahead and paint that now into my number 3. Now, I think it's important, too, to understand, guys, that there is more than one way to make skin tones. Lots and lots of different ways. This is just one of, like, thousands of different ways you could do it. So this is just kind of my way of giving you guys an opportunity to kind of practice this. By all means, if you find another way that works better for you, use it. You're never going to hear me complain about good work. So, but this will give you kind of a base to work off of, and then you go from there. I'm going to flip this around upside down again. I can paint this in. Again, if your paint's getting a little kind of on the thicker, kind of clumpy side, I just dip my brush and a little bit of water. I don't want a ton of water, just a little bit of water, just enough to kind of make it a little bit more fluid. There we go. Okay. So guess what I'm going to do now? What do you think? Yeah, I'm going to add more white to the pile, okay? So I'm just going to keep going. So I'm going to just start by, again, adding another scoop of white to this. I'm going to kind of make, you can see what I'm doing here, kind of making now like a little tangent over here off of the pile that I just made. Anytime I feel like I need to add a little bit more base, I'll just kind of scoop in a little bit more of the base. But I can also see, too, because I have them next to each other, just how much of a difference I have here. And I like that, so I'm going to go with that. I think it's also too important to mention, guys, that depending on what brand of paints you're using, different colors act differently. So, you know, if you're using different brands of paint, the burnt sienna from one brand to another is a little different. Go ahead and turn this around. Now, if you guys haven't realized or noticed, I have not washed my brush off at all. I don't need to because all the colors on my brush I need. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and add more white, again, to even make it lighter. Now you could, of course, you know, these scales could be huge. I mean, we could do 15 steps if we wanted to. This is just sort of like a start, a base, kind of get you into the practice of it. You know, could I go make lighter ones? Certainly. So there I have basically my tints done for that red undertone. Okay, so now I am going to wash my brush. The reason why is because I have white on this. If I keep the white on my brush and I start making shades, you know, when I add my blue to make a shade, or even if I have to add black to it to make shades, it's going to gray it out too much. So I need to get the white off of my brush, so I'm going to give this a good clean. So just make sure before you start your shades, you need to wash off your brush really well. You need to get that white off. So wash that off. Again, take your paper towel and squeeze out as much of the water as you can. Don't want a ton of water on your brush because that's just going to thin out your paint too much. Alright, to start with my shades, what I'm going to do, now I still have that half a pile over here. I'm going to now add just a dot, and when I mean dot, I mean dot, okay? Just a dot of the ultramarine blue into this mixture. Now, the reason why I'm adding blue and not black is because blue is a complement to like your oranges. Again, you want to make something a darker brown, and you've already got sort of a good warm base, add blue to it. So I'm going to add that ultramarine blue to this pile. And it looks like I need a little bit more. So I'm just going to add it until I see a difference. And you should see it go darker. Add just a little bit more. My paint's getting just a little kind of on the drier side, a little sticky. So a little water in there. Okay. So, once I feel like I've kind of made a step in the right direction, I'm going to go ahead and paint that down. I'm going to just keep going. So I'm going to add more blue. Now I do suspect, since red undertones, red's your darkest warm color, once I sort of exhaust what I can do with this ultramarine blue, I probably am going to have to add black to get it even darker, just because I am dealing with the red undertones. Red's your darkest cool color, so. I'm just kind of adding small amounts of that blue into my pile until I get what I think I need. There we go. And then for this last one, I'm going to add just a little bit more blue to my pile that I've been working off of. And then I'm going to add a dot of black, just because I don't think I can get much more darker with the blue. So I'm just going to add just a small, ever such a small amount of the black to it to kind of make that last shade that I want. And again, I always just add small amounts, so then I know when to stop. I don't want to go too far. Now again, these scales could be much bigger. We could keep going, but you know, I think you guys can get the point with this. Okay. So there is my red undertone value scale. We're going to stop there for today. Okay, so we'll stop there for today, and then we're going to do the yellow undertones and the cool undertones on our next class. Okay? So once you guys find a good place to stop on that, you can go ahead and start cleaning up.